So, what I'd like to discuss first of all is the song Apart on the album Wish, and how it sounds a lot like Ungrateful Girl. And when listening to more Syphilitica's Primrose, that's when I got the idea that, holy crap, this sounds a lot like The Cure, and I thought they were probably in the same key. But as it turns out, the Primrose album is mostly in the D minor key, whereas The Cure is mostly in A flat major. And then I got to thinking, you know what? This album actually sounds it reminds me of The Cure in general. And it's very interesting because Wish and Primrose use a red crimson album cover, which symbolizes passion. And that's when I realized, so does the album Pornography by The Cure, and Strange Day sounded a lot like I Fall Into the Light. I Fall Into the Light is D minor, just like most of the songs on the album. But Strange Day is G minor. But when I was doing my research on The Cure's album, I realized there are many different songs on that album that aren't actually in the same key. Most of the time, one album uses the same key throughout, but Pornography didn't. I was surprised to find out that Strange Day was in G minor, but Short Term Effect was an E flat major. And the song New Day, that's not on either of those albums, but is one of those bonus songs, those B-sides, that one is also E minor. And E flat major, sorry. And so I got to thinking, though, G minor and E flat major are very different, even though E and G are pretty close together. But D minor and F major are where most of the songs on Primrose are at, like I Fall Into the Light. But there are a couple songs, such as Silently There, that are in a totally different key. It's interesting because what we see with these goth albums is that they're mostly minors. Their keys are mostly in the minor. But those that are in the major key are usually the flat major keys. What's so interesting to me about the album by The Cure that deals with G minor and F major is that Strange Day and I Fall Into the Light actually also sound like Skeleton Kiss by Christian Death. But Skeleton Kiss is in the same key as Strange Day, which is F major and G minor. Neither of them are in the same key as I Fall Into the Light. I would like to preview some of these keys for you, but I don't really know how to do that on just one device. So later on, I'm gonna make these videos talking briefly about the sounds and the keys, but mostly I'm going to psychoanalyze the albums. And then later on, after I get an iPod, I'm going to actually play you the songs. I do have an iPad right now, so I can try and preview some of the songs for you a little bit and show you some of the keys on there, but it's very slow and a lot of the apps don't work on there. So I'm going to save up for an iPod so that I can show you some of the songs while we're videotaping. I do also have a computer, but it's broken right now. So I'll be right back. Oh, sorry about that. So some of the cool things about these albums, like I said before, and if you look through the track listing, you can kind of tell that it starts with kind of a pessimistic tone, but it ends in a pessimistic tone too. But the beginning is more of an adventurous type of pessimism, where the ending is more like a denouement, like it's finished, there's nothing that can be done. I'm going to show you the songs just barely to show you some of the similarities. Anyway, Apart and Edge of the Deep Green Sea remind me of Ungrateful Girl. And Orator has a similar bass line to Lullaby, even though that's Disintegration. Apart, Ungrateful Girl, and Edge of the Deep Green Sea are kind of about a breakup. So it makes sense that they sound similar. All three of these albums can be found on SoundCloud. The album by Syphilitica, which is an operatic ethereal wave album, actually cannot be found on YouTube. Only one of their albums can. Well, two of them. The one with a nun on it, but that's not actually shown as an album. That's just one of those compilations where they tell you it's an album, but it's one video. But the only album that's actually included on YouTube is the one with a heart on it. It just totally crashed on me. The albums The Lying and Open are similar, and I think that's interesting because they're both about vulnerabilities. Lying is a vulnerability, and so is being open, right? And the albums both progress in a way where one is angry, and then they're confessional, and then towards the end, they kind of just give up on both. Let's see if it'll actually load this time. I know last time I only did one album, but I wanted to start comparing albums a little bit as time goes on. Yeah, YouTube doesn't really work on here. Now, the album Tomorrow by Little Fantastic Partner is more of a less well-known album. But what's so good about that one is it progressively gets less angry, but I would say more fatalistic. I think that it's pretty obvious it was made with garage band instruments, but that's what makes it so good. It's obviously lo-fi, and it really inspired me to get back into music again. What makes it somewhat similar to Pornography, even more so than the more Syphilitica album, is that it has a slight death rock tinge to it, whereas more Syphilitica definitely doesn't. It's still more operatic and dark wave. So The Cure is like this, The Cure Wish is like this middle ground between the three albums. And you can see that with the artwork. I would argue that the Primrose, roses and flowers look a lot like growing eyeballs or growing zygotes. And I would argue that the cover photo from Primrose shows that these are the bare bones, the deconstruction of an eye. You can't see all through it. It's kind of obscure, kind of murky, kind of obsequious and matte. But that's what makes it so good, is that it's kind of hard to see through. And then The Cure has all of the flowers budding into eyeballs. It actually shows a picture of the earth and the flowers outside of it, as if flowers are different than other organisms. And you can see that they are turning into eyeballs. So that goes as if it's a growing, more progressive anger and languor and exhaustion and sense of just being worn out by the fact that you are becoming more exposed to the earth and to the elements. Whereas the prepubescent rose of the more Syphilitica album is full of calm, operatic happiness, and then it gets more angry and more goth rock and more dark wave. And Tomorrow by Little Fantastic Partner shows a couple people staring at a grown eyeball, and it makes me think of if you were to combine the people on the Pornography album art with the eyes, the eyeball, and the earth kind of being like an iris of an eye. All of that combined creates the album art cover for Little Fantastic Partner, and I bet they were influenced by The Cure's art. It's interesting too, because when you have the budding eyeballs and you have the people kind of like disappearing into the red ether on the Pornography album, there's still somewhat of a mystery. But Little Fantastic Partners album completely gets rid of that mystery on their art cover. They just show two people looking at this eyeball that also has a mechanical iris that could also resemble the mechanics of the Earth. And they're looking at it as if this eye is all-knowing and all-powerful, but hard to reach. And I think that that kind of reaches the exact conclusion that, in a way, the first album, Primrose, was reaching. That things are not finished. And even though they were not finished because this rose was merely in bloom, it kind of symbolizes death in a way, and how death isn't even final, because death is so similar to birth. When people get old, they are very similar to infants. They need help, even though at that point they know everything and infants don't. They still need help to function. Their faculties are going away, their abilities are going away, they're aging. But they don't know what happens next, and they know that certain things are unreachable, just like when one is little, certain things are unreachable. So even when you reach death, you do not reach the finalization of anything. There's still hope that there's something else to come, and we will never know because we have never talked to the dead. Some people believe in that. I don't happen to. I don't think there's any way that we could validate if we have talked to ghosts or not without actually being one ourselves. And I think that album really makes us realize that even when we die, other people will continue our path, and we leave a mark no matter what we do. Yeah, this isn't gonna work. But New Day and More Than 10 Years sound so similar with the like droney down lyrics that are kind of like this. And I think that that shows how these people are stuck and they want something more to come, but they feel like something new will never come. By the time we get to the end of the album, Silently There, are at the end of the Primrose album anyway, we have Silently There, and the bass line to that one kind of reminds me of Take My Breath Away. But it's also similar to Art of Death. The only difference is Art of Death is like the very beginning of the album Tomorrow, and Silently There is the end of Primrose. So how can the end and this beautiful, calming resolution be so similar to the beginning of an album that sounds so angry and demented? Well, it just shows that there's not that big of a difference, and the boundary is very thin between the two. I really hope you enjoy these albums. I can't give you any samples. Like I said, it's not loading, but they are all three really good. And to talk about your perspective, these songs somehow talk about your perspective, and they help understand the other person's perspective as well. Like with Apart, it's pretty obvious that the singer understands the perspective of the person that they're breaking up with, but they also understand their own perspective. And that is what is so simple yet so in-depth about The Eye. The Eye showcases how all three of these albums are very multi-sided, and every song is not that traditional. It doesn't deal with the tradition of one's own perspective as much as it does with one's perspective of all surrounding it. And I think that's what makes it so worldly. And I think Silently There and Art of Death discuss those concepts very well. Silently There shows how the singer perceives herself as silent compared to others, but how they are always silently helping her and part of her as well. An Art of Death is demented, and the singer says that they like to die, but they're also asking for help from others. And maybe they're getting more demented because they feel the art of death that happens all around them, that they are perceiving the death around them, and that's what makes them feel like they need to die, but they also are asking for help. So each of these songs has a very contradictory nature, but it's very interesting, and it invokes the soul of all who listens to it very well. Thank you. Hello. Today I will be discussing the third, this is the second music episode that I'm going to be doing, but it's also the first one where I will be discussing 3 albums. What's interesting about this is that these 3 albums all have an I on the cover. I'll be discussing Tomorrow by Little Fantastic Partner, Wish by The Cure, and more Syphilitica's Primrose. Now that last one doesn't actually have an eye on the cover, but it has a symbol that resembles an eye.